Our live coverage is from the Riviera Lanes, where we've been 16 of the 17 years in the Akron, Ohio area. Match number 2 with the winner to meet Gary Dickinson and then Steve Cook. 221 to 192, Anthony defeating Mark Roth. Speed and leaving a 7-pin.
Almost the same way you start off the first match against Roth, the solid 7 the first time, and what we call the weak 7, where the ball doesn't finish all the way up into the pocket for the second match. Earl, who is a tremendous spare shooter, as all the top pros are, should have no trouble with this. Cross lane.
And so the bowling proprietor from Dublin, California, has opened in the second game with a spare as we look at his wife, Susie. Now, Pete Couture. He's 35 years old, from Windsor Locks, Connecticut. 5'8", 140 pounds. He had the best average on this championship pair, 232. Here's his first shot under pressure. Close to the channel. And earlier, Webb won last year from number 3. We asked Pete what his chances were from that position.
Well, last year's champion, Wayne Webb, qualified in the 3rd spot. He's from New England. I'm from New England. This year, I've qualified in the number 3rd spot. He went on to win, so maybe we can do the same thing today.
Couture had a 300 in round number 4 this week here in the Riviera Lanes. A double now for Couture against Earl Anthony, and quickly out to a 10-pin lead.
Couture playing that extreme outside line that we've seen quite often this winter instead of the inside line that Mark Roth had. It shows you how fair this pair of lanes is. Some players are playing in, some are out, some are left-handed. It's just who could perform the best on championship day.
Anthony, after opening with a spare, has a strike in the second. In his first win over Mark Roth, as we replay the strike, he had 7.
Earl Anthony, excellent shot, knocking all 10 pins in the pit. And Chris, if he goes all the way, it'll not only be his 3rd Firestone championship, but he'll break Mark Roth's season record of winning, and that's for 12 months. Mark Roth said 134,500. Earl could go to 134,700 with a win today.
And only April. Stared at that 7-pin. Looks out at the lanes, comes back, looks up at Susie.
Earl Anthony likes to make the adjustment for a light hit by throwing a little slower. That time he threw the ball very slow and expected to get a little more break at the back end, and it just held there, and it had the same identical shot as in the first frame, the 7-pin.
What a credit to the Professional Bowlers Association, and he, along with Wayne Zahn, were inducted into the PBA Hall of Fame. It now numbers 24 on Monday night at the Champions Dinner, staged by the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. Now Couture has a double working, shooting in the 3rd frame. Avoided the split, leaving the 6 on the right lane.
Almost had the same fate as Mary Couture looks on that Mark Roth had. He left the 4, 7, 6, and broke out the 4-7. Pete Couture, very slightly built, slight elbow bend, but locks all the way through. Made a good shot that time, but just let it go too slow.
All right, it's a spare for Pete Couture. There you see the score sheet, 9-pin lead by the 35-year-old pro.
Pete Couture likes that outside line. His home house is Bradley Bowl, where we had last week's tournament. And Pete had an excellent week last week, but that house usually plays the extreme outside line, and Pete is very comfortable with it. He was actually disturbed by the ball return has a guide on it. He's talking to the tournament director that guides the ball either to the left lane or the right lane. He's pointing down to that little pointer you see right there in the center of your screen. And what Pete is saying is when he started his approach, it started to move.
It doesn't take much to break the concentration, though.
No, it won't bother him. What he should wait is maybe an extra second before he throws his shot, and that computer will reset that, and it won't bother him on his first shot. It won't move, and it shouldn't move anymore, should I say.
A double and a spare, now the 4th frame. Ooh! That's as close as we can get to the channel. Oh.
We said Couture is comfortable with that shot, and watch the line he's playing right on the very first board, hanging out over the channel. Starts at about the 5th board, goes outside the first arrow, hangs on the very first board, and cuts right into the pocket for a strike.
Cannot be faint-hearted and compete in this sport. We're going to take a break and then return live to Akron for the Firestone after this. One of the neat ladies of bowling, Joe Freeman, owner of the Riviera Lanes, where we've been for 16 of the 17 years for, the tops, the Tournament of Champions. Lovely lady.
She keeps the lanes in such excellent shape, such championship. Earl Anthony wants a re-rack. We've had a minute away for a commercial, and Earl, trailing by 9, wants to take his time, and for some reason there's a lack of communication, Chris, between the front of the bowling lanes and the back end. Remember, a player is allowed 1 re-rack per game, and Earl asked for it that time.
Wide world today, the WBA World Welterweight Championship. An incredible Tommy Hearns going against Randy Shields. Then a Kentucky Derby preview from Lexington, Kentucky. Yet a spare working a high hit, leaving the 4-7 on the right lane. Got to stay in Akron to see Tommy Hearns against Randy Shields. It's live everywhere except the West Coast.
Anthony going high, breaking up the split, left the 4-7.
For a while, it looked as though it wouldn't come up, but it did. Spare, 4th frame. Capacity crowd, a much sought-after ticket. In fact, they had standing room only crowds all week as 52 champions, including Nelson Burton Jr.
Thank you, Chris. Earl Anthony, for his appearances this year in the championship round, has averaged .212 for the 16 games going into today, where Mark Roth has averaged under 200 this year on the championship round.
So Earl Anthony in 5 frames gets his 2nd strike. And his victory over Mark Roth, 221 to 192, he had 7. Now Pete Couture, who opened with a double, marked with a spare, has a strike working for him in the 4th, shooting in the 5th. With an 11-pin lead, he can increase it.
Chris, nobody can forget the ball rolled in the channel by Larry Lobb in this championship round a few years back, and Pete Couture is playing precariously close to the edge of the lane.
High hit, the winner of 3 PBA titles.
Chris, we saw him break that up in the 3rd frame. Watch the ball from that outside line. You must trust the ball real wide like Pete did in the 4th to get a strike, but when it breaks through so sharply, the chances of getting a split are much increased. Wide open, much like Roth had.
So from a lead of 11, he's trailing now by 1.
It's so important to bowl well in the championship round. They bowled 48 games this week, down to the last 5 men for the most prestigious title of all, the Firestone. But you must perform on championship day, and that's Saturday. Earl Anthony has been the tops of doing that so far this year.
Pete last bowled in our telecast in 1979, the U.S. Open, when he finished 3rd. That's where he finished here in the TFC. Hesitant 7-pin, dropping into the pit for a strike in the 6th frame.
And that's the bonus for playing outside. That angle. Watch the 5-pin rip in behind the 7. Still the 2-pin comes over and knocks out the 7. Great shot, and I know Couture loved it.
Now, Anthony, who's won this event twice, has a strike up in the 5th, shooting in the 6th. Really one he wanted. The double gives him an 11-pin lead now in her 2nd game. His opponent, Couture, Windsor Locks, Connecticut.
As the scoreboard shows, Earl Anthony leads by 11, taking advantage of that open frame that Couture had in the 5th. Earl Anthony turning his back, going back to talk to Elias, wants a re-rack. He couldn't get Harry Golden's attention right away. Remember, a player is only allowed 1 re-rack during each game. This is Earl's 2nd, so he has to get permission of Harry Golden.
It's a good chance to thank a couple of 20-year veterans on our telecast. Harry Golden, the tournament director, and